Okay.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's installment of ClueCon Weekly. This week with us, we have Eric Hernaez, the CEO at RabbitRun Technology, an exciting new company working in the SD-WAN space. Thank you for joining us today, Eric.
My pleasure, Luca. It's great to be here.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction about your company, what you've been doing?
Uh, Absolutely, of course. RabbitRun is a relatively new company. The technology has been underdeveloped for about 3.5 years, but we really only started selling the product last August to beta customers, and have only recently gone uh, uh, to GA. But basically, what we do is we're SOHO SD-WAN, and what that is well, SOHO, of course, is an acronym for small office and home office, and SD-WAN is a kind of a it means many different things to different people, but what it really means is it fixes your internet connection. So if you the typical SD-WAN solution, uh, which is being deployed today, has some sort of device or router on a customer premise and another matching device in the cloud somewhere. And between those two devices, you can have multiple actual internet connections. And what it does is the technology virtualizes those internet connections so that you can use one, or you could fail over to another, or you could load balance across multiple ones. Uh, and the ability to virtualize those connections is what SD-WAN really means. So what we've done though is we've taken what has been uh, until recently an enterprise product, something designed for big corporations with many branch offices, and we've reimagined it in a way that works for small office workers and home office workers. And particularly, of course, since the pandemic, the demand for this type of solution for people working at home has been tremendous.
For sure. Yeah, that's a very interesting piece of technology. You're right. I've only heard SD-WAN mentioned in the space, large companies, even larger than what companies like Signalwire are. Honestly, like
Of
you,
course, of course. Typically, um, it's just that's true primarily because it's an expensive solution, and the way it's been deployed and really developed has been for enterprise type companies, 500 plus employees, and so small and mid-sized company like Signalwire and most of the companies out there, it's just not a economically feasible type of thing to deploy. And what makes it more expensive in its uh, existing incarnation out there in the world is the fact that you have this cloud component, and what happens is all of the internet traffic has to basically trombone or have an extra hop through the cloud, and so you're actually whoever's providing that SD-WAN solution is paying for all the bandwidth that's going through the cloud. And that's not only expensive, but it's also complex and brittle in a lot of ways. So the ability to manage that and provide that service means that the customer has typically been larger. What we've done is to take a lot of the intelligence that used to be in the cloud and put it at the edge. So now our solution, the RabbitRun solution, is able to work without that cloud component. So you get all of the benefits of SD-WAN, and those benefits are primarily the virtualization of multiple internet connections, the ability to be on a call like this and to fail over from your primary to the secondary without a glitch. So literally, on a call like this, the first internet connection could go out, and the people that I'm talking to wouldn't even know, right? You'd lose a second, if that, in terms of the packets going through, but really, for all intents and purposes, the call keeps going as if nothing has happened. Um, so it's exciting, the ability to have a solution that meets the needs of home office workers at a time like this when so many of us are working from home is really something.
for sure. So there's maybe a few questions I have that could be useful to introduce the main topic. We mentioned a couple metrics that are important for people that are working at home. One of them that I always like to explain is what quality of service means, and what does it mean that you can prioritize business traffic as opposed to normal traffic? Because people don't
Oh
really
yeah,
grasp that. Internet is the internet to a lot of people, right? So,
sure, yeah, of course. Quality of service, or QoS, really is just a term that's used to measure how good a call is. A lot of times when you're on phone calls over the internet or video calls over the internet, uh, packets that are moving through the network get delayed or lost altogether. And in a real-time conversation, if the packet gets delayed, it's of no use to the people on the other side. So it just gets dropped. And what that results in is, on a video call, either pixelation or just stuttering, or the drop of the video altogether. Or sometimes the video and the audio just get mismatched, right? And so you're talking and the audio is not quite there. So being able to fix QoS means that you're able to prioritize the right packets in a way that means that they have the best chance of getting to where they're intended to go. Now, this is especially important in the home office environment because, in a business, more or less, everybody is working, right? They're all doing business things, and so even though some applications are more important than others, um, there's somebody typically at that business who's responsible for the network. At home, though, especially if you have teenagers, it's usually the teenagers who are responsible for the network, right? And and what are they doing? Well, they're watching Netflix and they're playing video games, and they're doing all this bandwidth intensive stuff that is competing for the same bandwidth with the parents who are at home trying to do work. So, you're sitting at home, and your teenagers are playing games online. Your video calls and telephone calls are going to suffer because those same the packets are all competing for the same bandwidth. And especially with uh, uh, cable networks, where there's typically a lot of contention, that just means poor quality. So being able to manage that QoS for the business critical applications means that you're going to say, okay, the packets from mom and dad who are on video calls are going to get priority over the packets for Netflix and the video gamers, right? Not that those applications won't work. It's just that when there is contention, the important traffic gets priority. So we call that application steering, and it basically or application prioritization, and that basically means that some traffic is worth more than or is more important than others, and you're able to control that. Now, the second part of that, though, is an important part of our solution is that our device have built-in 4G modems, and
oh,
so although it can work with multiple broadband connections, uh, it typically is used with a single broadband connection, say your home cable connection, and that 4G modem with a SIM card, which we also provide as part of our service, as your backup connection. So if there's a problem with the primary connection, uh, being able to fail over to that 4G connection allows you to have that secondary path through the network that allows your calls to continue. Now, application steering is important because typically that 4G connection, cellular data, is expensive, right? You're paying the cellular carriers per meg or per gig or whatever. There's something included in your plan, but it's certainly not as cheap as your cable connection. So although you're able to fail over to the 4G connection, you don't might not necessarily want your kids Netflix watching or video game sessions to fail over 4G just because it's expensive and maybe the
yeah.
company is paying for that 4G connection. So that's the application steering part of it. So between the application prioritization and the application steering, it's really a powerful way for companies who have people working from home to be able to maximize the productivity.
For sure. Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect to it. So what I'm looking at right now is you mentioned your devices have a 4G modem on board, right? Do they have other capabilities? Like I'm looking at the I'm thinking about the edge stuff, like the ability to deploy stuff on the edge. First of all, can we just clarify what deploying to the edge means for people who are maybe not as technical as we are? And then maybe you could explain what the edge computing capabilities of your solution are, because I've been working on a lot of edge deployments right now as a part of a set of demos that we're doing. So first of all, we could do one together. And second, I'm very interested in what your edge capabilities are.
Sure, sure. Well, so basically the edge means, in our context, it means at the customer premise. So either, at the person's home, if it's a home worker, or if it's an office, at the office, and it's right before the internet connection. So, you have your local area network with all of the computers and whatever else is connecting to the internet. Um, and typically that's connected to a router that's at home, is usually provided by the cable company or whoever's your internet provider is. And so what we do is we put our device between the local network and the piece of equipment that your cable provider gives you. And that's called the edge, right? Because it's the edge of where your network ends and the cable provider's network begins. And that's a challenging place to be typically, because you don't have, especially in the home context, because you don't have a lot of visibility into what's going on there on the home network. And as a service provider, you actually very often don't have a lot of visibility, even in many office environments. You don't have a lot of visibility into what's going on the local area network, at the edge. Of course, as an application provider, especially a cloud application provider, you know what's going on in the cloud, right? And you can see everything that's happening in the cloud. But when it comes to figuring out what's going on at the edge, there's not a lot of visibility. So we solve that problem for service providers, also because, uh, well, a couple of reasons. Number one, in addition to fixing the QoS and providing the SOHO SD-WAN, we serve as a focal point for support teams to be able to, number one, get onto that local network, to be able to check it out and see what's happening. Because when there's a problem, especially a quality service problem, 9 times out of 10, it's something going on in that last mile between, the edge, and whoever the provider is of that internet connection. And when you're up here in the cloud, and you don't have a lot of visibility, of course, you can see packets coming to you and packets leaving your network, but you can't see when and how they arrive, at the customer premise. So being able to give visibility into what's happening from that perspective of the network is very important. But also, we have a zero-touch modem strategy. So what that means is you can just plug our device in, and it works. It automatically dials back to our home network, sets up an encrypted tunnel, and right away, the service provider has access to that device and can see what's going on the customer network. Uh, Importantly, uh, you don't have to play with firewall settings if on the local network. You don't have to have a public IP address. You don't need to set up NAT forwarding or do any of those things. It works even behind double NAT. So you just plug it in, really. And then once it's plugged in, again, it serves as a way for service providers to now have a view of the network and to help troubleshoot should quality of service problems arise. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
No, that's actually
yeah.
pretty interesting. So a couple other features that I'm very curious about. So as you know, well, I come from the real time communications world, and what I really like seeing is your no drop failover, including video and audio calls. So what I'm honestly curious about, without giving away any secret sauce, how does something like that work? Like how do you continue a call without having it drop? And does it support any provider? Will it work with any of the various? I mean, there's so much there that I'm really curious about how
Yeah,
it
yeah,
works.
there really is. And that is our secret sauce. I mean, that is what makes us different from other. We play in a curious space because you have 4G failover vendors that provide basically 4G modems, and you can fail over to them in case your main internet connection goes down. But they don't have the SD-WAN component, right? And then you have SD-WAN providers, and everybody's trying to solve this problem of failover. Now, um, if you look at it from the perspective of a more traditional 4G failover, when they fail over from your main connection to your secondary connection, it takes a while, right? Because you have to be able to know that there's a problem, number one, and then to make that switch, and then that switch takes some time. So typically what happens is there's a drop. If you're on a call, it's going to drop. Your internet might be back up in a few seconds, but you've lost your call. From the perspective of the traditional SD-WAN vendors, because they have, they're on both sides of the call, they can keep the call up. But they're doing a lot of there's a lot of different ways they can do it. Some of them send 2 packets or multiple packets, one on every connection. So even if one connection goes down, they still have a copy of that packet from another connection. And there's other strategies for making that work. We have a totally different approach, and the key word for us is fast. We're just very fast. We make that failover from your main connection to your secondary connection so quickly that the call stays up. Now, that doesn't work for every application. A lot of applications, especially cloud applications, require a persistent IP address. And so, but we work with every vendor, and we figured out which applications need that persistent IP address. And so, in our solution, if you do need that persistent IP address, then only the traffic that needs that persistent IP address goes through a cloud component. But that's the exception, not the rule. For most of the UCaaS systems that we work with, we can fail over without the need to route the packets through that cloud component. Now, I will say we haven't tested with SignalWire yet, and I'm looking forward to do that test.
Let's do it.
But with all the yeah, with all the bigger vendors, Zoom and Teams, we work just fine without the cloud component.
Oh
And
yeah,
I'm
so it's
sorry
not.
for mentioning the
Oh,
band.
I mean, that's
I
there's no
love
point in
SignalWire. I've been
there's no point in pretending they don't exist. We're just better, so they know we're coming. But I get that. Jokes aside, of course, it is
yeah,
absolutely, it's absolutely fair. Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'd be happy to take a look. So let's take a look at that. So one other
absolutely.
thing that I'm curious about: do you do some kind of connection bundling? So if I have many people that I talk about, especially when they're not super technical, I'm thinking my father. My father as a medium-sized business with 20 people in an office, and they have a failover internet connection, and they're always complaining that it doesn't that it sits there doing nothing. So they finally got around to getting a router that bundles both connections, and people don't notice, but now they have double the bandwidth. Is it possible to do on your equipment too, or do you
Oh yes,
prefer
of course.
recommend doing something else? Because it might be a matter of preference. I agree with
Yeah,
that.
no, of course. So we support 2 internet connections, and it can be 2 wired connections, or a wired and the 4G failover, and so any combination of those, and we can do load balancing. Although you typically wouldn't. I think what you're talking about is load balancing. So you get the full benefit of bandwidth on both your wired
Yeah.
connections. So if you have 1 gig from provider A and 1 gig from provider B, you get 2 gigs. So yeah, that we do support that. And um, I will say that in we have 2 flavors of devices. We have a small device that's really meant for people working at home, and that has a throughput of 500 meg. And then we have a larger device meant for the offices side, and that has a throughput of 2 gig. And that's very fast for a router. But that's part of, again, our secret sauce, in that we've created this technology that just works very fast. Um,
Super nice.
yeah, yeah, and I didn't mention, you know, our strategy and our goal is really to remove all the obstacles to having this deployed. And one of the big obstacles is dealing with, if you're using 4G as your second connection, dealing with the carriers is a real headache. Figuring out all their different plans and counting the bandwidth and knowing, how to uh, how to bill for it is challenging. So as an option, we include a eSIM with every device, and providers who choose to work with us can use our eSIM and deploy it, or provide their own SIMs, but most choose to use our eSIM. And our eSIM uh, is really special. I mean, eSIM technology is rather new. It only started gaining
Yeah,
traction
it
this
is.
year. But what happens is when you first power on the device, it scans all the available carriers and connects to the one with the strongest signal. And if for some reason that provider is, every cellular provider has problem areas from time to time. If there's a problem with that provider, it'll fail over to the next strongest signal and the next strongest signal. Now, of course, United States, there's three providers, so we have all three providers available. And so somebody deploying our platform, a service provider, doesn't have to worry about going out and making arrangements with all three providers. They can just come
Mhm.
to us and have a one-stop shop. Um,
That leads me into another interesting question. So, say I am, I work at home. I've been working at home for a while because things have changed. I'm watching this podcast, and I decide I want my company to get that for myself, or even I as a as my I wanted to get it for myself. What will be the process to get RabbitRun deployed in my home?
so we work with managed service providers, so either ITSPs or MSPs.
Mhm.
So typically, I mean, well, for you, I'm going to send you one anyway, so you don't have to worry. But for anybody else, typically the process is they'd have to ask their MSP or their ITSP to support it, and then we'd work with them to be able to deploy it. We don't sell directly to consumers.
Okay, so it will be something you get through your ITSP, not through your company IT department.
No. I mean, it, typically not. Most company IT departments actually work in conjunction with a service provider of some sort for their voice connections or their video conferencing. So we work with a video conferencing provider. So who knows? Maybe we'll work with SignalWire, but typically we don't sell directly to businesses.
Okay, yeah, so it will go through the ITSP. Yeah, that would be an
Yeah.
interesting provision to since you can do this without having any particular relationship with the provider. It really sounds like it might be interesting to actually just do it, right? To go for it and just have it and just get it done on your home. Like go and buy something. That could be
Yeah,
an
no, and as a small company though, we had to pick our channel, and so this is part of our strategy for now. But we intend to expand in the near future.
that
In
sounds
my
really
I've only been with RabbitRun for since March of this year. Before that, I was the founder of a company called SkySwitch, and with SkySwitch, we had 15,000 office, organizations, small and medium businesses on our white label UCaaS platform, um, and that was totally through the channel. So really, what I'm doing is I'm just recycling that business model. And going to the same types of service providers that we were able to find some success with in SkySwitch, um, because it's just the easiest way to get to market today. But that will change in the future.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's you have to pick your channels. You're right. Still, so say I am on ITSP and I'm interested. Just reach out to you.
Yep. RabbitRun.io is our website. Come there. We have a great partner program. It's for many of the partners we work with. This is a brand new source of revenue because uh, nobody was selling the solution to companies with home workers before, and now you can. And there's a big demand, and people are very interested in it.
Nice. Well, there's a lot here, and I think as things are going in the industry, there's a lot that's going to happen in that regard. Like people are working from home more and more. Many companies have already announced that they're not fully going back to the office, which is uh,
Yeah,
is an interesting it's an interesting
it's it,
proposition because I think it's permanent at this point.
yeah, it is very interesting, and it's going to create a lot of societal. issues like this that need to get solved. That obviously at first people were just like, we'll make it work, whatever, whatever needs to be done. But now they're more concerned about, well, what's it going to cost, and what's the tech stack that home workers are going to have, and how do we make it secure, and how do we make it resilient? And all these questions are getting answered, as we speak.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be well. It does have a lot of other changes with it. Like, what are we going to do with all of those office buildings now? But
Yeah, right.
there's I'm
That's a
already
good
hearing
question.
talks of where it is possible, right? Not all of them are suitable, but I'm already hearing talks of buildings being turned into housing, actually,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
where you can.
That
I mean,
and
not all of them are great
yeah,
to use like
or
that, but
or distribution centers for for
yeah, it really
everybody
depends on the
ordering
space
stuff.
there.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, a lot of changes are coming to the real estate industry. I imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Good. So, well, I think that was a very, very nice chat about SD-WAN, this new product that is RabbitRun that allows small offices and home offices to have the luxury of being able to to use something that was up until now reserved for the larger companies of the
The
world.
big guys.
And
Yeah.
this is certainly going to be something interesting. We really need to work on a demo together, so let's connect after. And actually, don't leave when we when I say goodbye. And
Yeah.
well, thank you, Eric. Eric Hernaez from RabbitRun Technologies was with us today, and thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And everybody else, I see you next week. Thank you for listening.